My mom has always wanted a bunch of grandkids. And then she saw like the pattern of my relationships. Yeah, it's hard when your mom says like, maybe you're not meant to be in a relationship.
I crave so hardly and so badly to be loved.
I've just developed connections with other girls that is stronger than the connection that I've had with you.
It doesn't make sense.
I wrote you a little poem.
It feels too good to be true. It's just, I feel like my fear is like,
The crazy thing with self-sabotage or self-sabotaging behavior is that it starts out as self-preservation. You do it to escape uncomfortable feelings that you never learned how to manage, so you stuff them down in ways that don't make sense.
Anytime you're feeling uncertain, you bring that up to me.
what's wrong with you? Why are you so perfect?
Ways that sabotage rather than protect, which is what you wanted in the first place. Like Lydia,
I crave so hard to be loved for who I am.
who completely blinds herself to the very obvious facts in front of her, that the guy is not into her.
Izzy caught me off. It sucks, it's shitty. He really didn't give me a reason.
Even though he was very clear with her as to why he didn't want her. Basically, there's no chemistry. It's actually that simple, girl. But the biggest symptom of self-sabotage, which I noticed and picked up on in this show, is the fear. The fear that things are not going to work out. So you're constantly preempting disaster. And nowhere is this more obvious than it is with Aaliyah.
Boy, I tell you, you are going to be my headache.
Who from the beginning was constantly worried about being hurt. That's like the thing that she's preoccupied with. Way before Uche gave her a reason to actually fear that, which we're gonna get into in a minute, because that mess. But I'm talking about her fears in general that started way before the triangle with Lydia.
I'm just scared, okay? That you're going to hurt me. How are you so sure that I'm what you want?
So those fears are actually very relatable. I get them. I mean, the reason I avoid being in a relationship, the reason I'm personally single is because I don't want someone to hurt me. I don't want to give my heart to somebody. So yeah, so I just avoid it altogether. And this fear as a symptom of self-sabotage is very obvious with Johnny, who, by the way, sealed the whole thing with a kiss of death with Izzy when Izzy was kind of trying to tell her that he may be leaning towards Stacy, the other girl. And she was trying to convince him, but her fears were taking over. And she was already painting a picture of what it's like without each other. When she was telling him, you know, if we don't end up together, you're going to be the thing that I think about for the rest of my life. And I'm going to be the thing that you think about.
If I don't live here with you and you don't live here with me, I'm always gonna think about you for the rest of my life as a what if. And I think you're always gonna feel that way about me too.
She's already romanticizing them not being together. And I feel that's what kind of sealed it, when our inner fears take over and they actually become the reality. And this self-sabotage is very prevalent in people with childhood and developmental trauma. And Johnny talked very openly about her childhood with her mom who basically was telling her that she's not gonna end up in a relationship. Yeah, that's a very hard pill to swallow, right? And having your parent tell you something like that. And this really reminds me of a guy, a beautiful guy that I had a serious crush on, and I knew him from yoga years ago. We used to go to the same yoga studio. And he was this guy who never opened his heart to anyone, but was just seducing everybody, men, women, it didn't matter. And the closer I got to him, I understood where all that comes from, and it was the relationship with his father. And his father would always tell him that he's not proud of him growing up. And the way he told it, there was such pain in his voice. But anyway, enough about him. Let's get back to Love is Blind. And joining me this week, by the way, is Sadia, who I've lip-synced to before. She has a channel here on YouTube, Sadia Psychology. And today she's joining me in the form of dominatrix. Because a dominatrix makes play out of this punishment and pain, whereas these people who are involved in self-sabotage on the show are inflicting pain on themselves in a very detrimental way. So she's here to whip them into shape, so to speak. Take it away, Sadia.
The child is literally murdering themselves. It's a slow suicide when you don't love them. So they find a way to kill themselves on a daily basis, either by the way that they're thinking, by the food that they're eating, by the substances they're taking, or the partners they're choosing.
I'll just be honest with you. I dated a lot of people with like addiction issues. Oh my God, this is like a lot.
Hey y'all, it's In Denial, your favorite drag therapist. I can't believe they're back with a new season of Love is Blind, and Netflix did not disappoint. The drama of it all, girl. And you know, as much as we all say, these people are trashy when we're watching them, we love the drama. I mean, we watch for the drama. So I was watching Love is Blind Brazil, the 3rd season or whatever it was, the latest one, and it was so kumbaya, and everybody ended up getting married, and everybody loves each other, and it's like, ew, what the fuck? So, you know, I mean, poor people who volunteer their lives for our entertainment, but let's bring out the popcorn, shall we? And by the way, this week I'm framing it all with the self-sabotage because it's a subject that I have a PhD in. So let's get cracking.
Pods are now open.
So self-sabotage, right? Let me know if this scenario sounds familiar. You have a big presentation coming up or a big fund application, something very important for you in work that you're applying for. And you know you need to get it, and you know you need to do so much work and research to get it, but deep down inside you have this belief that you're not going to get it. So you don't put in the work. And when the time comes, you end up being unprepared, and sure enough, you don't get it. And you're like, see, I knew it. Things never work out for me. So self-sabotage is basically you standing in the way of your own success in a repeated fashion. And nowhere is it more painful than in the area of romance. And the most obvious example of self-sabotage in the area of romance on this season is what Johnny did with Chris. Because she was developing this bond with Chris, right? And they even talked about meeting each other's families and how much he wants her to be part of his family. And it was so sweet.
I can picture you sitting on the couch laughing at everybody.
Aww.
Well,
That's what I want. I want
like
you to envision me playing games with your family. That's sweet.
I really do see myself marrying you.
I could see how our lives would play out together.
But then of course there's that little crush that she has on Izzy.
But I definitely feel like a 5th grader with a crush on Izzy. I do feel like emotionally I have a stronger connection to someone else.
I want you to know that I really did enjoy all of our time together.
Deep down inside, Johnny and all of us, we always know when we've let go of something good. We know it. It eats at us.
It's okay, it's okay.
Listen, it's okay.
Hey.
No, but I'm I let go of the one who really cared.
But the thing with self-sabotage is that you cannot stop it. You know these fears, it's almost like these fears seem insurmountable, they're bigger than you. You can't, with Aaliyah, for example, she constantly going on and on and on about how her biggest fear is, will someone hurt her?
It's just really hard to trust people. How do I know he's not gonna fuck me over?
Or Lydia, who knows deep down inside that her kryptonite, even though she acts like it doesn't matter, is her inability to pull it together because she's so loud and all over the place and basically too much.
I'm an engineer.
You're an engineer!
My efforts are still gonna be there 110%.
Oh my God, Izzy! Oh my God, you're so perfect! When are you gonna propose to me?
But she continues to delude herself by acting like there's nothing wrong with that.
In the past, I've been called too much. Oh my God, no! But I don't think I'm too much. I am smart, I am brilliant.
Nope. Not smart nor brilliant. Because being smart is acting in your own best interest and becoming self-aware beyond the cliches of wanting to be loved for your soul.
Having someone who truly loves me for who I am, for my soul, that's what I want. So badly.
Yeah, girl, we all do. Who doesn't want to be loved for their soul or who they are? But the point is, what are you doing to actually attract that into your life? The good news though is that there are ways to break out of this self-sabotaging behavior. And I'm going to talk about that at the very end after we go through all the different examples, because what we're going to do in this video is talk about what self-sabotage looks like and how to identify the self-sabotaging behaviors. That's step 1. And then we're going to talk about why people do that. What are the triggers for self-sabotage? And of course, we're going to be using these poor people from Love is Blind as examples. So we can pretend that there's nothing wrong with us. We can just focus on them. Oh, that's me. I'm not narcissistic at all, girl. Not at all. So let's talk about the self-sabotaging behaviors or the symptoms. The first one is procrastinating and reprioritizing. By procrastinating, meaning you make excuses as to why you can't look after yourself and you have to put things off. And reprioritizing is replacing. So replacing can be something like I don't know, I can't get to what I want to do because I have to take care of this person, I have to take care of that person. Like there's always a priority that's more important. And it could be replacing what you really want with something else. And this I notice a lot in Aliyah when it comes to sex. Sex seems to be the thing that she uses as, as avoiding what she really wants to talk about. Because when that whole cheating thing came up, when Uche asked her, did you ever cheat in past relationships?
Have you ever cheated in a relationship?
Once. It was in the relationship where I was just not sexually satisfied for 2.5 years. I'm human, like I have my needs too.
But before we go further into Aliyah's self-sabotaging behavior, while we're on the subject of Uche and this cheating thing, can we talk about what a hypocrite Uche is? First of all, his reaction to her cheating was like, boy, oh boy, oh boy. So you're a recent cheater. Not good. Girl.
When was this?
2 years ago.
Oh boy, you're a recent cheater. It's not good.
I'm not the same woman I was at that time, Uche.
That's only 2 years ago, though. That's not a long time.
That's a long time.
No, it's really not, though.
Okay.
First of all, not only is it hypocritical because it turned out that you were actually sleeping with her best friend 3 months before the show started and you lied about it, whereas she actually volunteered this information to you. But we're going to get to that later when we talk about Lydia and the whole triangle with her and Uche and Aliyah. But also this argument that recent cheating is not okay, whereas old cheating is fine. Like, I don't get it. What's the cutoff time? Like, if she cheated 10 years ago, it's okay, but 2 years is too recent? It doesn't make any sense. Time is not important. It's not important how much time has passed. What's important is your relationship to the cheating. Like, what have you learned from it? Why you did it? And do you feel any guilt or shame about it? Like, how you talk about it. That's what's important. It's not how much time has passed. And also, I did not like the way he was talking to her. It is very... I don't know, he got on this moral high horse, like...
You don't feel embarrassed or ashamed of what you did?
I dealt with that guilt for a long time.
And also, the way she reacted, Aliyah, makes me think somewhere in her childhood, she was scolded and reprimanded because she immediately went into this like little girl. She was like shrunk and she was squirming in her seat and like fidgeting around. And she was like, okay. No, girl, stand up. You're clearly sorry for what happened and you had reasons for why you did it. Of course, cheating is not okay, but don't let this guy bully you. Like, gross. So ultimately, good thing that she ran from Uche. But what I'm talking about here, when it comes to Aliyah's self-sabotaging behaviors.
And I know my sex drive, so...
So she's been using sex as a replacement way before Uche entered the picture. And of course, there's nothing wrong with having sex. This is not the issue. And Sadia would agree.
I actually know that's not what I really talk about, and it's not what I care about either. What I care about is why are we selecting partners like that, and why are we using sex as a coping mechanism? Where is the pain?
Yeah, okay.
Now, the second behavior or sign of self-sabotage is courting temptation, putting yourself in a situation that's going to take you away from your intended goal. So you end up hurting the goal that you set out for yourself.
That is why I'm here and why I'm a walking red flag, but also deserving of love.
Like Johnny, who left Chris for Izzy when there was such genuine, authentic connection between her and Chris.
Yeah, my dog is my child.
Writing that down now.
Do you have a dog?
I foster on the weekends.
You foster?
Yes.
You're so sweet.
The check marks are going off on this end.
Oh, I really like you, Chris.
Yeah, I really like you too, Johnny. My connection with Johnny is just as natural as it can be.
Whereas she was connecting with Izzy over trauma and past trauma, like with their previous relationships. Like he was engaged before and didn't work out, and she was married and it didn't work out, which of course these are good things to talk about. But when you compare the stuff that she was connecting on with both guys, you can see the difference. Like there was so much light and fun and ease with Chris, and there was trauma that was putting her with Izzy.
Yeah.
It does get lonely, I'm not gonna lie.
Have you been in long-term relationships?
I was actually engaged.
I've actually been married once before.
It doesn't freak me out, doesn't scare me at all.
Yeah, the question is, why is this trauma pulling you? But of course, it is pulling her, and she ended up dumping Chris for Izzy.
It's a shitty feeling like you're not enough. It's like losing a best friend.
Little side note, by the way, about Chris. How cute was it when he was describing the love that was developing for Johnny?
The baby brother of love is caring for someone. You know, it's just a little care and then it grows into love.
But cute or not, she ended up dumping him and going to Izzy. And this is the ultimate sign of self-sabotage, because not only did she leave the ease, genuine, natural connection between her and Chris for Izzy, who's more full of trauma and excitement, she ended up even ruining that by telling Izzy, the man that she loves and wants, that the only guy she ever fell in love with was a drug addict who overdosed while she was married to someone else. Like, let's say, okay, you don't want Chris, you want Izzy, but why would you tell Izzy this? It's crazy.
After we broke up over the drugs, fast forward 2 years later, I was married to someone else. A girl messaged me on Facebook. The only person I have ever loved in my life died of a drug overdose.
And then after she dumped all this information on him, she's not even giving him time to process it.
But I don't really know what else you want from me at this point, Izzy.
It's not that I want anything from you, so please don't state it that way.
Now, one thing I relate to Johnny about, and it's actually similar to the fears that Aaliyah had, is this idea that when she was talking about her past relationships, that she was never able to give her heart to anyone.
Chris would have been repeating the past few relationships where I go into something that feels like it makes sense and I wouldn't get hurt because my heart's not there.
And unfortunately, I also relate to the pettiness from Johnny, because after she dumped all this information on Izzy, Izzy decided that not to continue things with her and to pursue things with the other girl, Stacy. So Johnny started shit talking about Stacy, which was like, it's not a good look, girl, but relatable.
Not to be rude, I feel like if he chooses Stacy, he's gonna regret it because I don't feel like their connection. I feel like Stacy's his Chris.
And then the self-sabotaging, the nonsensical behavior continues when she goes back to Chris after Izzy dumped her, basically, and telling Chris that, oh, you're the safe one, not exciting. Like, why would you say this?
You're like the safe choice.
Kind of hurts hearing that you don't think I am exciting.
But the most interesting thing that happened with Johnny on the show is the little triangle that she formed for herself between Chris and Izzy. And this is where you know she's actually a professional gaslighter. She's probably gaslighting herself in the process as well. And gaslighting is good when it contains a lot of truth in it. So it ends up convincing other people and probably yourself as well. Because she told them different versions of the same thing. Like the common thing that she told both guys is that Chris is the safe, unexciting, boring option. So that's the truth, and she told it to both guys. But she told it in very different ways because she was still trying to rope in the two guys. First of all, she was telling Izzy that Chris is the safe option, and she's always gone for the safe options. And now she wants something exciting for the first time in her life. And what she told Chris is that you are the safe option, but I've always gone for the exciting. I've never gone for the safe. So now I want to go for the safe with you. My God, that is some next level manipulation.
She said everyone who she dated always was a safe feeling, but she was never in love with them. So she couldn't see herself like that with you.
She literally told me basically the same thing, but opposite. The reason she felt better with you was because I was like the safe thing, and she's not used to that. She's used to more excitement.
But she's only manipulating herself at the end because she ended up not being with either one of the guys. Another behavior sign of self-sabotage is self-medication. Now, I'm not gonna say Lydia's an alcoholic because, you know, these shows, Love is Blind and others, they keep the alcohol flowing so that, you know, it lets out the inner demons of everyone that we love to watch. But the way Lydia was consuming that alcohol...
I'm a big personality and I love to dance. I am loud. I'm from Puerto Rico, so it comes with the territory.
I can't stand it when people blame the culture thing, like that crazy one on Queer Ultimatum. She was like, oh, I'm Latina. I'm just like, girl, no, it's got nothing to do with you being Latina or Puerto Rican. You're just insane. It's you, honey. Yeah, there are some generalizations, but when you're treating yourself or other people like shit, when you're involved in self-destructive behavior or behavior that destroys other people, that's not the culture. That's your own inner demons. And also this kind of like self-medicating, whether she does it with alcohol or just good old-fashioned denial, which is the most powerful drug in the world, basically deludes her from actually seeing what is happening in front of her. Like, because she was after Izzy in the beginning, and he clearly told her, I'm not interested in you. And then he was trying to like, you know, push her away, and he was basically asking her like, what about connections with other guys? Have you developed other connections?
I have, but they haven't been in the same level. And I just trying to follow my gut. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Your gut is seriously mistaken, girl.
I like your vibe. I like your energy. It's so weird because I want to feel you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know, like, we have a lot in common. Do you feel the same way? I hope to see you in my dreams.
Bye.
See you in my dreams. Bye. And this segues very nicely into another sign of self-sabotage, which is cognitive dissonance. Basically, a fancy word for delusion, for being in denial. Speaking of which, by the way, did you subscribe to my channel? As I always say, I'm in denial so you can wake up.
When Izzy is talking to me, it feels good.
Does it though? Does it? But this form of delusion really is self-degradation. It's actually masochism. That's why it's self-sabotage, because you're treating yourself with very little to no respect. And the interesting thing here is that we don't know anything about what kind of parents Lydia had, right? Because she didn't mention her family. Maybe we're gonna meet them in the next batch of episodes. I doubt it. It looks like in the previews, by the way, we're gonna meet Milton's family, and he looks like he has a sister who's not here for Lydia's bullshit.
It's phony.
But even though we didn't meet Lydia's parents and nobody mentioned them, I'm willing to bet anything that her parents somehow, or the upbringing, led to her self-sabotaging behavior. Because I have never met anybody with loving parents who involves in self-sabotaging behavior. Because self-sabotage only happens when you have parents who've hurt you in ways that you can't even articulate or express or even wrap your head around.
But their body keeps score of it. So they start becoming masochists, either emotionally or physically. And I always find it comes from family and comes from mom and dad.
What do you think is missing?
What's missing, girl, is the ability to recognize what happened to you as a child, articulate it, process it, and be able to give it to yourself. And a very good example of that, of the opposite of Lydia basically, of recognizing what happened to you in your childhood, processing it, crying about it, and moving on from it, is JP, the firefighter who got together with Taylor. Because when they were in the pods, before he proposed and he met Taylor, Taylor was asking him, tell me about your childhood. And basically he spoke about how angry his mother is and how abusive she was, especially towards his sister and the sisters that he had to take care of.
So growing up, my mom was like a really angry person. But she would take out her anger on my sisters. In the beginning, I was too young to actually do anything. But when she would leave, I would go in there and just try to comfort them. I think it was just part of the her and my dad's relationship.
I love how in touch he is with his feelings. It even makes him more manly to me because like it's clearly like bubbling under and he couldn't talk about it. But yeah, he understood it. He understood exactly what happened and what led to him being the way that he is. And his being in touch with his emotions is also super cute when he was proposing to Taylor.
You're sweeter than sugar, super genuine, and the most amazing woman I've ever met.
Yeah, I love JP, but I'm actually very concerned for him because after we saw him meet Taylor face to face, you can tell Taylor is not into him. She was trying to convince herself that, you know, I used to care about looks, but I don't anymore, but I used to, but I don't anymore. And it's so amazing not to care, to be in this place. Oh my God, it's so amazing. Girl, who are you convincing? Because nobody's buying it. Also, like, she's focusing on, like, the gap in his teeth. What? I don't see, I mean, maybe there is a tiny gap, but that's code word for you not being into him.
Like, that's so stupid to not be with someone because of their teeth, you know? Looks don't matter to me anymore. I fell in love with JP based off his heart. Like, it's one of the best things I've ever done in my whole entire life. It's one of the best things I've ever done in my whole entire life.
And then the figurative kiss of death is when they were sitting down and like there was this awkward silence that dropped. And she was like, I don't know, it's weird putting your voice with your face. It's weird.
It feels weird, like putting your
voice with your face now.
Why?
I don't know. It's just like weird.
It's not that you're ugly. It's just, it's weird. That's all. I'm just weirded out by it. That's all. Your face is weird. What? You find him ugly, girl. And who does that remind you of, by the way, from last season? Exactly. Irina and Zach. Because when they met, she was clearly not into Zach. And that's the first thing that she said. This is weird.
Oh my gosh, this is so weird.
Hell yeah, Love's Blind. Yeah, I'm proof of it.
You're gonna get divorced. Yeah, this whole season, by the way, it's a disaster. I mean, the entertainment level is through the roof, but there's no love. There is no love in sight. Not only is love not blind on this season, it's non-existent. But back to the self-sabotage and those self-saboteurs that we have in the cast. Those people who let the demons come through, who let the voices. Yes. So we talked about the behaviors. Now let's talk about the whys, the trigger. So what is a trigger? It's this thing that sets you on fire immediately before you have time to even think about it. It could be something as simple as a joke or a comment from somebody, but basically it's something that starts this kind of spiraling, this bout of anxiety, shame, and guilt, and makes you emotionally dysregulated. As adults, we become triggered by stuff that is reminiscent of old painful feelings that we haven't processed from childhood. Painful feelings that we couldn't even acknowledge back then. We didn't dare to acknowledge because we were probably in survival mode. And now when you're exposed to it as an adult, you start acting as if you're exposed to a threat. Like complete PTSD, like someone who leaves the war zone and just reacting in normal like civil life to like basically you're having inappropriate reactions. That's what being triggered is like. And I have an example from my own personal life recently. Not really romantic, but it really shows the trigger. I performed my latest show at a theater festival here. And by the end of the festival, I was expecting to win the big prize because I won it last year and my head was this big. And my ego, girl. And everybody was telling me like, okay, you're gonna win and you don't need to tell me twice. So I went to the ceremony prepared to win and I did not win. And girl, I did not take it well. I was the textbook definition of a diva because all my pain, all the stuff of just not being chosen or being left out, all that kind of stuff just came out in that moment. And I knew like almost like there was another version of me, the wiser version of me that was watching and like, girl, this is really inappropriate, but I could not stop myself. I was basically triggered. And this is actually a very nice segue back to the Love is Blind and the triggers on Love is Blind. Because one of the biggest triggers for self-sabotage is this deep-seated belief that there's something wrong with you, that you're not enough. And that's usually you internalizing the pressures that come from outside. And a very good example of that is Johnny, who spoke to us about her mom and what her mom would tell her growing up. But actually, she's not that unique. Many people, many of us carry this trauma from childhood and it ends up leading all our choices in life.
Trauma really has really predictable effects on human beings. Some of the verbal kind of abuse sometimes that might come out when you're triggered is predictable because trauma is predictable because human beings are designed to be loved. And when we're not loved, we go down a particular path.
And that's why, by the way, Johnny, when her love wasn't reciprocated by Izzy, she became extremely petty and she started talking about his low credit score.
I'm a fiance. I'm like, oh my God.
Are you so happy?
Because he told me he had a bad credit score. He just signed a lease somewhere else. Like, he doesn't seem ready for commitment.
My God, it was a messy. Just like, by the way, in the awards ceremony when I didn't win, I was like, okay, all these other nominees are shit. I'm better than all of them. It was not a classy look. But that's what happens when the trigger is so much bigger than you, right? So after basically Izzy left Johnny, she went crawling back to Chris, begging him, trying to convince him. And the way they left it is that Chris chose himself, right? That he doesn't want anything to do with her.
My whole life I've had a hard time picking the correct women. I really need to be selfish today and worry about myself.
Nice try though. Nice try, Netflix. Because in the preview for next week, we see both of them there. And it's implied that maybe they just came in as like outside visitors. But I have a feeling, something tells me that Chris is still gonna propose to Johnny. Because Chris is also self-sabotaging. bitch. Because that's what happens when you're faced with a trigger that is bigger than you. You end up choosing something that is wrong for you. Either that or Chris and Johnny, like all of them. All the contestants from all the past seasons, they just want to be on camera. That's why whenever, if you notice, like this is the pattern that's been becoming more and more apparent as the seasons go on. The second someone is dumped by someone, they just go to their next best option. It's like completely negating everything they said about being in love with that other person, their first choice. Now it's like, okay, what do I need to do to stay on the show? It's almost like, and I don't know, Chris, from what we can see, his feelings for Johnny are very genuine. But there was something in the very beginning, in the first episode, where he talks about himself as a playboy, and that's what girls think of him. It makes me think,
Just off my looks, everyone kind of thinks I'm a playboy, kind of push girls to the side.
But anyway, back to the triggers of self-sabotage. A big one is self-esteem, low self-esteem. And nowhere is this more obvious than with Lydia. Her self-esteem is so low that she's prepared to beg Milton, this 24-year-old who she has zero interest in, that she wants him so badly. She's trying to convince him just so she can stay on the show, or I don't know what the hell, or to be loved or to feel loved.
I just want you.
I want you. Girl. And poor Milton, by the way. My God. I don't know how he doesn't see that there's zero chemistry. Like, he's feeling something for her, but
I couldn't stop thinking about you like last night. Like it was like so nerve-wracking. Couldn't sleep at all.
Yeah, the amount of bullshit that she's throwing at Milton, like when he's clearly alarmed by her hiding the fact that she had something with Uche from before. So he's concerned. So in her efforts and attempt to convince him to stay, she starts talking about, put yourself in my shoes, and she's crying about what I've had to endure. Like, what does that have to do with anything?
Can you, for 5 seconds, put yourself on my shoes of what I've had to endure?
And also, stop with being so vague. Like, tell us, maybe you've endured a lot in your life, or you've had to endure so much. But what is it? She's never specific. But deep down inside, Milton knows that Lydia is not good for him. Because that part where he's talking about himself always being a risk taker, but something about the situation is giving him pause. Yes, that thing is your gut, honey.
I'm a huge risk taker. And for some reason, I've been overthinking about this.
Milton is truly a 24-year-old. He's so clueless. I mean, he may be very smart, maybe very book smart, because there's also, of course, intellectual intelligence, but emotional intelligence is something that you can only gain from experience.
That's what really attracted me to you. You really know yourself really well.
Really? She knows herself well? How? What does she know? Is it because she's loud? I don't get it. What? And in the beginning, I felt this Milton is so young, he's so naive, he has no real experiences. Because first, when he was talking about his trauma in the very beginning, before the spine and all that stuff, which is really heartbreaking. In the very beginning, there was a very funny scene where he's talking about, thing that troubled him is he went to Japan, and I was in Japan and I didn't get good grades. And then I came here and I had good grades. I'm like, wow, that's so sad. But then later on, it turns out that the poor guy has had a lot of trauma. I think it was scoliosis, and there was trouble with his spine. At some point, he had 12 drill holes in his spine, and the pain was so intense.
That pain was I didn't want to cry in front of my parents or my sisters.
That part broke my heart, that he couldn't tell his parents. To be ashamed to cry even in front of your parents or your family or your sister, it's that's very lonely. So it goes to show you that Milton is really not in touch with his feelings. Because if he was in touch with his feelings and understood himself, he'd be able to understand someone else, like Lydia. Because right now, he thinks she's so in touch with her feelings, and she's so vulnerable, and she's so open, and she knows herself. But this girl does not know herself. She's so afraid to be alone with herself enough to know herself. She's constantly clinging to other people, even not just the guys, but also she's clinging to girls and forcing friendships that are not even there. When she's immediately jumping to Johnny, no. Yeah, she's just terrified of being alone. And Sadia has a couple of words about that for Lydia.
But I think with low self-esteem, what happens with low self-esteem is you go on to do self-sabotaging behaviors. I feel low, so now I'm just going to eat loads of shit, or I'm going to drink loads of alcohol, or I'm just going to go have frivolous sex. So what happens with the low self-esteem, you end up doing bad decisions. And those bad decisions make your life worse.
But this clinging to people that Lydia does, it's very disturbing when it comes to Aaliyah. When they start crying together and she hugs her, because At that moment is when we find out that Lydia used to date Uche.
He told me. You know? You know?
So, speaking of trust and honesty, one of my dates on the first day, it is a girl that I have dated in the past. It's Lydia.
Like 3 months before the show started, that was the last time they slept together, and they had a thing from 2020 already. And neither Lydia nor Uche thought to tell Aaliyah about it. Yeah, the hypocrisy from Uche is really... girl. And he says at some point that production told him not to reveal it to Aaliyah, which, fine, maybe. I'm sure producers of these shows are constantly manipulating situations, but the bottom line is you lied. They both lied, even Lydia. And it's crazy to think of Lydia's now reactions, knowing that this was going on, how she was reacting to Aaliyah coming back from the pods telling her about Uche before. She would always hold her and comfort her and give her advice, especially that one scene where Aaliyah came back telling her, this is the man for me. And he says that he can't live without me. And that faraway look in Lydia's eyes.
I really am falling for this man. He told me he can't see a future without me. Wow, he said that. Mm-hmm.
She even has to close her eyes, like, oh my God. Like, and she's hiding all that information. There is something seriously messed up, diabolical, manipulative about this whole thing. Also the pain that she's carrying. And to act like she's gonna be her best friend later, even with this, like, you clearly have unresolved feelings for Uche. But the funny part with Lydia is she's so unhinged, because now that the truth is out, now she can finally unload everything on Aaliyah. And Aaliyah's like, girl, I don't know if I want to know all this. And Lydia's all like, oh, I know his dog, I know his friends, I know his job, I know his house. Oh my God, his house. And at some point, Aaliyah's like, literally like unraveling, like, please, no. She's like, ha ha ha.
Oh, his house is dope.
Yeah.
And Aaliyah was understandably upset by this whole thing. Like, who can blame her? And it's true that Aaliyah probably did the right thing in the end by not showing up, by just walking out on the whole process.
Uche, unfortunately, Aaliyah has decided to not continue with the experiment.
But I do believe that her fears, regardless of what Uche did and his manipulation, Aaliyah is ruled by her fears, which end up self-sabotaging her and going against her interest, which is to find love. Because even from the beginning, she was talking about this need that she has to challenge the relationship and the love. Instead of just going with it and then facing the challenges as they come, she has this need to find the challenges and face them and put the relationship under test. Like, that comes from a lot of fear.
You got to protect yourself because you just don't know. I want to challenge the fact that we feel so sure.
And the trigger here is, of course, the fear of change and the need to control, things being outside of your control. But all these triggers, the internal and external motivators, basically end up becoming like hurdles that you put in your own way and sabotage your chances of love. And everybody on this cast is guilty of that. And I believe that happens for them and others and all of us who involved in self-sabotaging behavior. It happens because in the first few years of your life, you weren't emotionally cared for in the proper way. So you learn to isolate.
Then they go from one sabotage after the other, and you'll create a teenager that you can't stand and an adult that you can't trust with their own life. So just invest in the first couple of years.
Actually, this unresolved childhood trauma as a trigger for self-sabotage is apparent in all the contestants, not just the 3 girls that I mentioned, and on all previous seasons. And one very big one trigger that I didn't mention so far is the fear of abandonment, which actually Izzy was very open about from the very beginning.
I just want to be loved unconditionally. I just want someone that will just not fucking give up on me.
Yeah, this fear of Izzy's, this fear of abandonment and fear that someone's going to give up on him comes from his childhood, because we later found out that he didn't know his biological father, and he found out much later by accident from a cousin that the man he thought was his father wasn't his father.
And I went to my cousin's house. I'm in shock, and wow, I can't even believe I'm telling you. This is fucking, I don't ever tell anybody this story. And just like out of nowhere, he just kind of stops me. He's like, dude, you know that's not your real dad?
So he found out like very casually that his father gave up on him, and then he was raised by someone who is very strict, a strict Jehovah's Witness who even prevented him from celebrating Christmas. So basically after all that, he grew up with this need to be part of big family celebrations.
That's why I can't wait to be with somebody else and like join their family and join y'all's traditions.
And I believe this abandonment wound of Izzy's is not resolved because it forced him to cling to someone like Stacy. He ended up proposing to Stacy. And Stacy is someone who's not ready, really, for love and being vulnerable.
What you told me is like pushing me in that direction to be able to say it to you. And I know I'll be able to communicate it to you when it's right. Is this all?
And it was so crazy when he was hearing her saying that. You could see how his eyes are like, he's just going away in a fantasy land. For me, the way I interpret that, and I could be like projecting a lot of stuff or just forming my own story, like this kind of like longing for a father who's not there or love that is not there, that to him is love, because he's almost like idealizing it the way, and just sitting like a good little boy when she was telling him she's not ready to tell him I love you, even though she accepted his proposal. Just kind of, there was something off about it. I don't know, more to be found out about those two, but I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of problems around Stacy being incapable of showing her feelings. Because in the very first episode from these 4 episodes that we saw, when the subject of vulnerability came up and Izzy was telling her, how come you can't be vulnerable? Like, she was talking about vulnerability like it's a project.
It's not necessarily that I'm bad at being vulnerable. What I can promise you is I'm not gonna like half-ass it. I've never failed anything.
Like, there's nothing I can't tackle. Like, I'm gonna take the vulnerability on. Easy there, Wolf of Wall Street. That's not how that works. This attitude is the antithesis of emotion and vulnerability. Vulnerability, and I know from experience of being incapable of being vulnerable, is you have to surrender to stuff. It's not a project. You don't do an Excel sheet. Girl. But while we're on Izzy and Stacy, it's so sweet. I love the part when he was proposing to her. It gave me chills when he was telling her, I promise to be kind and patient and all the stuff that he was saying. I was like, ah.
I just want you to know that I will always be patient with you. I will always be kind with you.
Yes, bitch, work.
So now that all is said and done, what do we do about these triggers? These triggers that force us to behave in self-sabotaging ways. First of all, we have to pay attention to the triggers. Instead of turning into a snowflake and forcing everyone to behave in a way that doesn't trigger you, consider the origins of your triggers. Like, where do they come from and what is it about? And notice the way you react to being triggered. Do you scream like Lydia? Or do you run like Aaliyah?
I feel like that's that poetry coming out.
So how do we stop the self-sabotage, right? And there are 2 situations to consider here. The first one is before the self-sabotage had already started. So when things are calm, like for example right now, when you're neutral, you're not in a situation where you're triggered. First of all, make a list of the self-sabotaging behaviors that you find yourself doing. And then make a plan with detailed steps of how you want to tackle those behaviors. And the third one is telling your friends and a support group, if you have one, about those self-sabotaging behaviors. That way you can hold yourself accountable. Now, the second situation is when the self-sabotage has already started, when your brain is already unraveling and not making sense.
Universe has like a weird messed up to mess with me.
So in a situation like this, what do you do instead of rambling like Lydia? Start something, a mindful exercise, whether it's meditation, basically sitting with yourself, zipping it, and just sitting with all the uncomfortable feelings. And the second one, this I find very helpful, is writing down, not journaling like pretty journaling with like dates, something you can read back, something you could just basically stream of consciousness of what's going on, so you can just dump it out of your brain, literally empty your brain of it and just throwing it away. It's like almost like when you write an email, an angry email that you want to send to someone and just leaving it in draft and not sending it. When you read the stuff back, you're like, shit, I only mean like 2% of everything that I want to say. So when you can just dump all these thoughts onto paper and just look at them, you're like, shit, okay, now I'm done with it. So yeah, hopefully that helps. And I can't wait to see what next week is going to bring. Thank you for watching. Please comment, like, and subscribe. And finally, so you're a recent cheater. Not good.